They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I never understood that phrase until the night my family tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I was supposed to love, only to discover that the failure they mocked had become an empire they couldn't even imagine. I should have known what kind of evening it would be the moment I walked through the front door of my parents' house that Friday night. The air was thick with the smell of Mom's famous pot roast, but there was something else too, something I couldn't quite place. Tension, maybe, or anticipation. Jessica was already there, of course, perfectly coiffed and dressed in one of her expensive business suits, the kind that screamed success and superiority. Her husband Brad stood beside her like a well-trained guard dog, drink in hand, that smug smile already plastered across his face. My younger brother Mark arrived minutes after me, breezing in with his usual swagger, talking loudly on his phone about some massive deal he was closing. He barely acknowledged me with more than a dismissive glance before launching into a conversation with Brad about investment portfolios and market trends. I stood there in my simple jeans and sweater, feeling like an outsider in my own family home. Mom was fluttering around the dining room, setting the table with her best china. It was her birthday dinner, after all, and she wanted everything perfect. Dad sat in his armchair, reading the newspaper, occasionally grunting in response to whatever Mom said. This was normal. This was always how it had been. What wasn't normal was the way Jessica kept glancing at me with that particular gleam in her eye, the one that told me she was planning something. I had learned to recognize that look over the years, learned to brace myself for whatever cutting remark or passive-aggressive comment she had prepared. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt orchestrated. I had spent the last 5 years of my life building something from nothing. While my family saw me as the disappointment, the one who dropped out of law school to chase some ridiculous dream of making videos on the internet, I had been quietly constructing an empire. Not quietly, actually. I had been doing it right out in the open, on platforms with millions of users, creating content that resonated with people all over the world. But my family had never bothered to look. They had decided years ago what my story would be, and they weren't interested in any plot twists. Jessica had always been the golden child. 3 years older than me, she had checked all the right boxes. Top of her class in high school, full scholarship to an Ivy League university, law degree, partnership track at a prestigious corporate firm. She married Brad, who came from money and made more of it in real estate. They lived in a penthouse downtown, drove luxury cars, and spent their weekends at country clubs. She was everything my parents had hoped for, everything they wanted both their daughters to be. Then there was Mark, the baby of the family despite being only 2 years younger than me. He had followed Dad into finance, landing a position at a major investment firm straight out of business school. He made 6 figures, wore Rolex watches, and never let anyone forget how successful he was. He and Jessica formed an alliance of superiority, often teaming up to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy, which was somewhere near the bottom. I had tried for years to get them to understand what I was doing. I had tried to explain that content creation was a real career, that digital media was the future, that I was building something meaningful. But every attempt was met with condescending smiles and thinly veiled insults. Jessica would pat my hand and say things like, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to get a real job?" Mark would laugh and make jokes about me being an unemployed millennial living off avocado toast and participation trophies. My parents would exchange worried glances and change the subject. The truth was, I had stopped trying to make them understand about 2 years ago. That was when things really started taking off for me, when the algorithms finally clicked, when my content started reaching millions instead of thousands. That was when the industry started noticing, when the offers started coming in, when Richard Castellano, one of the most respected talent agents in Hollywood, reached out to me with a proposition that would change everything. But I didn't tell my family any of it. Why would I? They had spent years telling me I was wasting my life, that I was an embarrassment, that I needed to grow up and get serious. They had made it abundantly clear that they didn't believe in me, didn't respect what I was doing, and didn't care to learn more about it. So I let them believe what they wanted to believe. I let them think I was still struggling, still scraping by, still the family disappointment. And I waited. I waited because I knew that one day, the truth would come out. I knew that eventually, they would have to face the reality of who I had become, and I wanted that moment to be on my terms. I wanted it to hurt. I wanted them to feel the weight of their judgment, the sting of their cruelty, the shame of their ignorance. Maybe that makes me petty, maybe it makes me vindictive. But after years of being treated like a failure, like a joke, like someone to be pitied and scorned, I think I earned the right to a little revenge. The dinner started normally enough. We gathered around the table, made small talk, passed dishes around. Mom seemed happy, which was all I really cared about. It was her birthday, and despite everything, I loved my mother. I had brought her a thoughtful gift, a custom photo album I had made filled with pictures from throughout her life. She had cried when she opened it, which made me feel warm inside, even as Jessica rolled her eyes and Brad whispered something to Mark that made him snicker. But then, After the main course was cleared and before the cake came out, Jessica stood up. She had that gleam in her eye again, brighter now, almost excited. My stomach dropped. I knew something was coming, something bad. She walked over to the large flat-screen TV mounted on the dining room wall, the one my parents usually only used for watching the news, and pulled out her phone. "Before we have cake," Jessica announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought it would be fun to share a little something with everyone. You know, to really celebrate Mom's special day." I felt my body tense. Brad was grinning now, and Mark was leaning forward in his chair like he was about to watch a particularly entertaining show. My parents looked confused but curious. And me? I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my face carefully neutral. I had learned a long time ago not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. Jessica connected her phone to the TV, and suddenly the screen lit up with one of my old videos. Not even one of my good ones, but one from 3 years ago, when I was still figuring things out, when my production quality was rough and my confidence was shaky. It was a video about trying different coffee recipes, and it had maybe 5,000 views, which at the time had felt like a victory, but compared to where I was now seemed almost laughably small. "I found this little gem on Maya's channel," Jessica said, her voice mocking. "I thought we could all enjoy it together. Look at our little internet star." The video played on the huge screen, and I watched as my younger, less polished self tried to demonstrate how to make a cappuccino. The sound was tinny, the lighting was bad, and I stumbled over my words a few times. It was the kind of early content that every creator makes before they find their voice, before they learn the technical skills, before they become good at what they do. But to my family, who had never bothered to follow my journey, who had never seen how far I had come, it looked like evidence of my failure. Brad started laughing first, that braying, obnoxious laugh of his. "Oh my God, this is priceless. Maya, is this what you do all day? Make coffee on camera for nobody?" Mark joined in, barely able to contain his amusement. 5,000 views. Wow, sis, you're really making it big. I think that's less than the number of people in my LinkedIn network. Jessica turned to me, her smile vicious. "When people ask me about you, I have to lie and say you work in digital media, because I'm too embarrassed to admit that my sister is trying to be a failed TikTok influencer. Do you know how humiliating that is for me?" My parents said nothing, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes, the way they looked at me with a mixture of pity and shame. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mom busied herself with collecting plates, unable to meet my gaze. They weren't defending me. They never did. Jessica wasn't done. She picked up my phone from where I had left it on the table, holding it up like it was evidence in a trial. "Let's see what kind of important notifications our little celebrity has tonight." She was swiping through my lock screen, which thankfully she couldn't get past, but she could see the notification previews. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was what those notifications actually said. I watched her face as she scrolled, saw her brow furrow slightly when she noticed there were a lot of them, more than she expected. "Nothing exciting, as usual," she said, but I could hear a slight uncertainty in her voice. She handed the phone back to me with a dismissive gesture, but her hand trembled just slightly. I took the phone back slowly, deliberately. I looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time that evening, I allowed myself a small smile. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who knows something you don't. The smile of someone who holds all the cards and is just waiting for the right moment to play them. "You don't know what you're looking at, Jessica," I said softly, but there was steel in my voice. "And you're going to regret every word you just said." The room went quiet. Jessica looked taken aback by my tone. I never challenged her. I never fought back. I always just sat there and took it, absorbed the insults, swallowed the hurt, and moved on. But not tonight. Tonight was different. Brad laughed nervously. "Oh, come on, Maya. Don't be so sensitive. We're just having a little fun." Mark chimed in. "Yeah, if you can't take a joke, maybe you shouldn't put yourself out there on the internet." Before I could respond, before I could say any of the things I had been holding back for years, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the tension like a knife, and everyone turned to look toward the front door. Mom got up to answer it, confusion clear on her face because we weren't expecting anyone else. I heard voices in the entryway, one of them instantly recognizable. Sophia. My best friend, my producing partner, the person who had been with me since the very beginning of this journey. She burst into the dining room, her face flushed, her eyes wide with urgency. She was carrying her iPad, and the screen was lit up with what I knew were emails and messages from various production studios and streaming platforms. "Maya!" she practically shouted. "Oh my God, you're here. I've been trying to call you. I've been texting. Universal is going absolutely crazy. They need to talk to you right now." And Netflix just increased their offer. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Sophia like she had just spoken in a foreign language. My parents looked completely bewildered. Jessica's mouth actually fell open. Brad and Mark exchanged confused glances. But I stayed calm. I had been waiting for this moment. I knew it was coming. Richard had told me the timeline, told me when the deals would be finalized, when the news would break. I had known that tonight, of all nights, was when everything would come together. The timing was almost too perfect, like the universe itself had decided to give me this gift. And then Richard walked in. Richard Castellano was not a man who went unnoticed. At 40 years old, he had the kind of presence that commanded attention. He was impeccably dressed in a black Armani suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his expression all business. He wasn't alone either. He had brought 2 of his assistants with him, both equally professional-looking, both carrying briefcases and tablets. They looked like a team of lawyers about to close the deal of the century, which, in a way, they were. "Maya," Richard said, his voice urgent but controlled. "I apologize for the interruption, but this can't wait. The final contracts are ready. $180 million for a 3-picture deal and a streaming series. Universal needs your signature immediately. The private jet is waiting at the airport." He said this loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. I watched as the words hit my family like a physical force. Jessica actually stumbled backward a step. Brad's drink slipped from his hand, splashing onto the carpet. Mark's face went completely white. My parents just stared, unable to process what they were hearing. Richard noticed them for the first time, his eyes sweeping over my family with barely concealed disdain. "I'm sorry for the interruption to your dinner, but this is a deal that could reshape the entire entertainment industry. Time is of the essence." 180 million? Jessica's voice came out as a whisper, barely audible. "Universal? What are you talking about?" Richard looked at her, then at me, one eyebrow raised as if asking for permission. I gave him a small nod. Might as well let them know everything. Sophia, still holding her iPad, stepped forward and connected it to the same TV that had just been used to mock me. Within seconds, the screen changed from my old coffee video to something very different. It was a news article from Hollywood Reporter, one of the most prestigious entertainment industry publications. The headline was massive, impossible to miss. "Maya Chin, from digital phenomenon to Hollywood superstar, record-breaking $180 million deal with Universal Studios." Below the headline was a professional photo of me, taken just last month at a major industry event. I was wearing a stunning designer gown, my hair and makeup done by professionals, and I was smiling confidently at the camera. I looked nothing like the nervous girl in the coffee video. I looked like exactly what I was, a successful, powerful woman who had built an empire. But it wasn't just one article. Sophia scrolled through several more. Forbes, Variety, Entertainment Weekly, The Hollywood News. Every major entertainment publication had covered the story. And they all had one thing in common: my face, my name, my success. Richard took over, his voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a presentation. "Maya Chin has been one of the most sought-after content creators in the entertainment industry for the past 2 years. She has over 50 million followers across all platforms, her videos have generated more than 2 billion views, and she's won multiple Streamy Awards, several Shorty Awards, and was named one of Time magazine's most influential people in digital media." He paused, letting that sink in, watching my family's faces as they processed this information. Jessica looked like she might be sick. Brad had gone from smug to stunned in a matter of seconds. Mark was frantically pulling out his own phone, presumably to search for me online. My parents just looked shocked, completely unable to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the woman being described. "Her career isn't just about making videos," Richard continued, his voice gaining strength. "She is a brand, a business, an empire. The deal we're finalizing tonight makes her not just an actress, but also a producer, a creative director, and potentially a director for her own franchise. We're talking about merchandise, licensing, international distribution. This isn't just about one movie. This is about building something that will last for decades." He turned to his assistants, who immediately began pulling out documents, showing graphs and figures and projections on their tablets. Major studios have been competing for her signature for months. Disney made an offer. Warner Brothers made an offer. Amazon, Apple, Hulu, everyone wanted a piece of this. Universal won because they were willing to give Maya complete creative control and a producer credit on everything. This is the largest deal for a digital creator in entertainment history. Jessica found her voice, though it came out strangled. "But we thought, you said she was just making videos in her apartment." Richard's eyes went cold. "Just making videos?" Miss Chin's production quality rivals that of major network television shows. Her content has been studied in film schools. Her storytelling techniques have been analyzed in marketing courses. She has created a new genre of entertainment that bridges the gap between traditional media and digital platforms. She's not just ahead of the curve, she is the curve. He turned to look at each member of my family, his expression one of disbelief. "Wait, you mean to tell me that none of you knew about any of this? Maya has been on the cover of Variety 3 months ago. She was featured in Forbes magazine. Entertainment Weekly did a 10-page spread on her. You never Googled your own daughter, your own sister?" The silence that followed was deafening. No one had an answer because the answer was obvious. They had never bothered to look. They had made up their minds about me years ago, and they had never cared enough to see if they were wrong. They had been content to believe I was a failure, content to mock me and diminish me, because it made them feel superior. I finally stood up from my chair. Every eye in the room turned to me. I looked at my family, really looked at them, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was clarity. Pure, crystalline clarity about who they were and who I was, and what I needed to do next. I kept this secret on purpose, I said, my voice steady and calm. For years, you told me I was wasting my life. You said I was an embarrassment, a failure, someone to be pitied. If I had told you about any of this, would you have believed me? Would you have been happy for me? Or would you have found some way to diminish it, to make it seem less important, to convince yourselves that it wasn't real success? My parents both looked down at their hands, unable to meet my eyes. The answer was written all over their faces. Jessica. I turned to my sister. You just stood there and humiliated me in front of everyone. You played my old work on that screen like it was evidence of my failure. You said you were embarrassed to tell people about me. You picked up my phone to mock my lack of notifications, not realizing that those notifications were from some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. Jessica's hands were shaking now. Her perfect composure was cracking. Maya, I didn't know. I didn't realize. You didn't care to realize, I corrected her. None of you did. Mark, you spent years telling me to get a real job while I was building a business that's now worth more than your entire investment portfolio. Brad, you laughed at my work while I was creating content that's been viewed more times than you could count. Mom, Dad, you looked at me with disappointment every time I walked through that door, never once asking about what I was actually doing, never once showing any interest in my life. Mom started crying. Honey, we just wanted you to be safe. We wanted you to have security. I have security, I said firmly. I have more security than anyone in this room. I own my own production company. I have a team of 20 people working for me. I have investments, savings, real estate. I've been financially independent for 3 years. But you never asked. You just assumed. Richard stepped forward again. Maya, I don't mean to be insensitive to the family moment here, but we really need to go. The studio has lawyers waiting. The contracts need to be signed tonight, or we risk losing the deal to another party who's been circling. Jessica suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Maya, please, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Please forgive me. Mark was on his feet too. Maya, I apologize. I had no idea. I shouldn't have said those things. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My father stood up, his face red. Maya, wait. Let's talk about this. Let's sit down and discuss this as a family. But I was done talking. I had spent years trying to communicate with them, trying to make them understand, trying to earn their respect and approval. I was done begging for crumbs of validation from people who should have believed in me from the start. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't really sorry at all. But I have a plane to catch. I have a deal to sign. I have a career to build. And I've wasted enough time trying to prove myself to people who were never going to see me anyway. I turned to Richard and Sophia. Let's go. Maya, please. Jessica was crying now, actual tears streaming down her face. Don't leave like this. Let me make it right. Let me be happy for you. I paused at the doorway, looking back at my sister. You know what, Jessica? For years, I wanted nothing more than for you to be proud of me. I wanted Mom and Dad to brag about me the way they bragged about you. I wanted Mark to respect me. I wanted all of you to see me as someone successful, someone worth celebrating. But I don't need that anymore. I stopped needing your approval the moment I realized I could succeed without it. I walked out of that house with my head held high, Richard and Sophia flanking me like bodyguards. There was a car waiting outside, a sleek black Rolls-Royce that looked completely out of place in my parents' suburban neighborhood. The driver opened the door for me, and I slid into the luxurious leather seats. But before the driver closed the door, I turned back one last time. My family had followed me outside, standing on the front porch under the lights. They looked small suddenly, diminished. Jessica was still crying. Mark looked lost. My parents looked older than I had ever seen them. You called me an embarrassment to this family. I called out to Jessica, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet evening air. Well, tomorrow, the whole world is going to know the name Maya Chin. And you're going to have to live with the fact that while you were busy mocking me, I was busy becoming someone you couldn't even imagine. Have a good night. The door closed, and the car pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I watched my family standing there, frozen, as the full weight of what they had done, what they had missed, what they had lost, finally hit them. Inside the car, Richard handed me the contract. It was thick, full of legal jargon and terms and conditions, but the bottom line was clear. $180 million for 3 major motion pictures and a streaming series. Complete creative control. Producer credit. A percentage of all merchandise and licensing. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of, and more. I signed my name with a flourish. "Congratulations, Maya," Richard said with a rare smile. "You've just made history." "No," I replied, looking at my signature on the page. "I've just gotten started." My phone had been buzzing constantly since we left the house. I had turned the sound back on, and now I was being bombarded with notifications. Text messages from Jessica, from Mark, from my parents. Voicemails, missed calls, emails. They were all saying the same thing. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please forgive me. Please talk to me." There was one text from Jessica that was longer than the others. "Maya, I Googled you. I found everything. The articles, the awards, the followers, everything. I can't believe I never knew. I can't believe how cruel I was. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk? I want to make this right. I want to be a real sister to you." I read it and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just nothing. The sister I had wanted, the family I had needed, they had never existed. And I was finally okay with that. Sophia reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did it," she said softly. "You really did it." "We did it," I corrected her. "This wouldn't have happened without you." She smiled. "So, what happens now?" I looked out the window at the city lights streaming past. Now? Now we build an empire. Now we make films that matter. Now we show the world what we're capable of. And we do it all without needing anyone's permission or approval. Richard was on his phone, already coordinating the next steps. The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Every major outlet will be there. This is going to be the biggest entertainment story of the year. The next day, the world woke up to the news. Maya Chin, the name that my family had tried to diminish and mock, was suddenly everywhere. It was trending on every social media platform. It was the lead story on entertainment news shows. My face was on the covers of magazines, on billboards, on websites. And my family? They were learning what it felt like to be on the outside. Jessica called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. She sent text after text, each one more desperate than the last. Her colleagues at work had seen the news. They were asking her why she never mentioned that her sister was Maya Chin, the Maya Chin who just signed the biggest content creator deal in history. She had no good answer. Mark's social media was flooded with comments. People he had gone to school with, people he worked with, people he barely knew, they were all asking about me. "Your sister is incredible. How come you never told us about her? You must be so proud." But Mark had spent years telling anyone who would listen that I was a failure, that I was wasting my time, that I would never amount to anything. Now he looked like a fool. My parents received calls from friends, neighbors, distant relatives, everyone wanting to know about their famous daughter. And they had to admit, over and over again, that they hadn't known, that they hadn't supported me, that they had, in fact, discouraged me at every turn. The shame must have been unbearable. Brad apparently tried to tell people at his real estate firm that he was connected to me through his wife. He tried to use my name to impress potential clients. It backfired spectacularly when someone asked him about my work, and he couldn't answer basic questions. He had never bothered to learn anything about what I did, and now it was obvious. I spent that day in meetings with studio executives, lawyers, and producers. We discussed the projects, the timeline, the vision. It was exciting and overwhelming, and exactly what I had always wanted. Richard was by my side the entire time, guiding me through the process, making sure I understood every detail of what I was agreeing to. But even in the middle of all that excitement, I couldn't stop thinking about the night before, about the looks on their faces when they realized the truth, about Jessica crying on the porch, about my parents' confusion and shame. Part of me wondered if I should have handled it differently. Part of me felt guilty for the pain I had caused them. But then I remembered how they had made me feel for years. The constant criticism, the dismissive comments, the way they treated my dreams like they were childish fantasies. I remembered every time they made me feel small, every time they made me feel like I wasn't good enough, every time they chose to believe the worst about me rather than giving me the benefit of the doubt. And I remembered the look on Jessica's face as she played that video on the TV, the glee in her eyes as she prepared to humiliate me in front of everyone. That wasn't love. That wasn't family. That was cruelty. So no, I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt free. 1 week later, I was on a film set for the first time as a producer and lead actress. It was surreal, walking onto a real Hollywood soundstage, seeing the lights and cameras and crew members all there because of a project I had created. The director was someone I had admired for years, and now we were collaborating as equals. The other actors treated me with respect, interested in my vision and my ideas. This was my world now. This was where I belonged. Jessica sent me another message that week. "I see you everywhere. On TV, in magazines, online, everyone's talking about you. I'm happy for you, Maya. I really am. But I'm also devastated, because I realize now what I threw away. You're my sister, and I should have been your biggest supporter. Instead, I was your biggest critic. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I recognize what I did wrong, and I'm working on being better. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. It was a better apology than the desperate pleas she had sent at first. There was some actual self-reflection in it, some acknowledgement of the real problem. But it was also too little, too late. I thought about responding. I thought about what I would say. But in the end, I decided that my response was the life I was living, the success I was achieving, the happiness I was feeling. That was my answer to her, to all of them. My parents tried a different approach. They sent me a letter, handwritten by my mother. It was long and emotional, full of apologies and regrets. They talked about how proud they were, how they wished they had been more supportive, how they wanted another chance to be part of my life. They said they loved me and always had, even when they didn't know how to show it. Reading that letter hurt more than I expected it to. Because part of me still wanted to believe them, still wanted that fairy tale ending where we all reconcile and become a happy family. But I knew better now. I knew that their love had always been conditional, dependent on me fitting into the mold they had created for me. They loved the idea of me, not the reality of who I was. Mark's apology came in the form of a public social media post. He posted a photo of us from when we were kids, along with a caption about how proud he was of his sister and how he had always known I would do great things. It was complete bullshit, of course, rewriting history to make himself look better. But it also showed me exactly who he was, someone more concerned with appearances than with actual relationships. 3 months passed. 3 months of filming and press tours and interviews and photo shoots and meetings. 3 months of my face being everywhere, my name being on everyone's lips, my projects being the most anticipated releases of the year. I had become exactly what Richard had promised, a phenomenon. And in those 3 months, I didn't see or speak to my family once. I wasn't punishing them, exactly. I was just living my life, focused on my work, surrounded by people who had believed in me from the start. Sophia was there every day, helping me navigate this new world. Richard was my advisor, my protector, my advocate. My team at the production company was loyal and dedicated and excited about what we were building together. I didn't need my family anymore. And that realization was both liberating and sad. But then, on a random Tuesday afternoon, I found myself in my old neighborhood. I was there for a meeting with a local charity that wanted me to be their spokesperson. After the meeting ended, I had some time to kill before my next appointment, and almost without thinking about it, I drove past my parents' house. The house looked the same as it always had. The lawn was neatly trimmed, the flowers in the garden were blooming, the front porch still had the same rocking chairs. It looked so normal, so unchanged, like the events of 3 months ago had never happened. But I knew they had changed everything. I didn't stop the car. I didn't go in. I just drove past slowly, looking at the place where I had grown up, where I had spent so many years feeling like I didn't belong, and I felt a strange sense of closure. That house wasn't my home anymore. Maybe it never really had been. My phone rang. It was Richard. Maya, I have news. The early screening numbers for the first film are through the roof. The studio is already talking about fast-tracking the sequel and expanding the series order. They want to give you your own production division. I smiled. Tell them I'm interested, but I want full autonomy. Done. I'll set up the meeting for next week. This was my life now. Making decisions that affected millions of dollars and thousands of jobs. Creating content that would reach audiences all over the world. Building something that would last long after I was gone. A few days later, I was at a major industry event, one of those glamorous affairs where everyone who's anyone in entertainment shows up. I was wearing a custom designer gown, my hair and makeup professionally done, walking the red carpet with photographers shouting my name. It was overwhelming and exciting and everything I had never let myself dream about because it seemed too impossible. And then I saw them. Jessica, Brad, and Mark, standing off to the side in the area reserved for guests who weren't important enough to walk the carpet. They had somehow gotten tickets, probably through one of Jessica's legal connections. They were dressed nicely, but they looked out of place, overwhelmed by the spectacle of it all. Our eyes met across the space. Jessica's face lit up with hope. She started to move toward me, but security stopped her. She wasn't on my guest list. She didn't have clearance to approach me. She was just another face in the crowd. I could have gone over to her. I could have told security to let her through. I could have hugged her and played the role of the gracious celebrity who had forgiven her family. The press would have loved it. It would have been a great story. But I didn't. I turned away and continued down the carpet, smiling for the cameras, stopping for interviews, acting like I hadn't seen them at all. Because in that moment, I realized that they had made their choice years ago when they decided I wasn't worth their respect, and I had made my choice 3 months ago when I walked out of their house. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation or a calculated strike. Sometimes it's just success. Overwhelming, undeniable, impossible to ignore success. The kind of success that makes people realize, too late, exactly what they threw away. The premiere was a massive success. The film received a standing ovation. The reviews that came out the next day were glowing. Maya Chin proves she's not just a digital sensation but a genuine talent. A star is born. The future of entertainment has arrived, and her name is Maya Chin. I read the reviews with Sophia over breakfast at a trendy cafe in West Hollywood. We laughed and cried and celebrated together. This was what it was supposed to feel like, I realized. This was what family was supposed to be. People who believed in you, who supported you, who were genuinely happy for your success without any jealousy or resentment. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jessica. I didn't read it. I had stopped reading them weeks ago. Richard had suggested I block her number entirely, but I didn't. I let the messages come, let them pile up unread, a digital monument to too little too late. A few months later, I was at a coffee shop working on the script for my next project when I overheard two women at the next table talking about me. I had gotten used to this by now, people discussing me like I wasn't a real person, just a celebrity to be analyzed and commented on. Did you see that Maya Chin interview where she talked about her family? One woman said. Oh my God, yes. The way she handled that question about whether her family supported her career was so classy. She just said they have different perspectives, but she wishes them well. I would have dragged them. The other woman laughed. Right? Especially after I read that article about how they didn't even know about her success. Can you imagine? They went on talking, but I stopped listening. That interview had been tough. The reporter had asked directly about the rift with my family, and I had to decide in real time how to answer. I could have told the truth, exposed them, made them look as bad as they deserved. But in the end, I took the high road. I gave a diplomatic answer that neither confirmed nor denied the full story. Because the truth was, I didn't need to punish them publicly. They were punishing themselves. Every article about me, every interview, every success was a reminder of their failure. Not their failure as lawyers or investors or real estate developers, but their failure as family, as the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. A year after that fateful dinner, I won my first major award, Best Actress at a prestigious ceremony, beating out several established stars. As I stood on that stage, holding the award, looking out at thousands of people applauding, I thought about my family. I wondered if they were watching. I wondered if they felt proud or ashamed or some complicated mixture of both. In my acceptance speech, I thanked Sophia, Richard, my team, the director, my co-stars. I thanked everyone who had believed in me and supported me on this journey. I did not thank my family. The omission was notable enough that several entertainment outlets wrote articles about it the next day, speculating about the ongoing estrangement. Jessica sent me a message congratulating me on the win. It was short and sincere sounding. You deserved it. You were incredible. I'm proud of you. I actually read that one, and for the first time in a year I responded. Just 3 words. Thank you, Jessica. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just acknowledgement, a small crack in the wall I had built between us. She responded immediately. Can we talk, please? Just once? I thought about it for a long time. Days turned into weeks. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted to hear what she had to say, wanted to see if enough time had passed for real healing to be possible. But another part of me was scared. Scared of being hurt again, scared of falling back into old patterns, scared of letting them back in only to be disappointed once more. In the end, I compromised. Maybe someday, but not yet. Her response was simple. I understand. I'll wait. 2 years after the dinner that changed everything, I was at the peak of my career. 3 successful films, a hit streaming series, a production company that was developing dozens of projects, and a net worth that had climbed into the hundreds of millions. I was one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment, a household name, a cultural icon, and I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I had never been before. I had built exactly the life I wanted, surrounded myself with people who valued me, and created work that I was proud of. But there was still an empty space where my family should have been. I felt it at events when I saw other celebrities with their proud parents in attendance. I felt it during holidays when Sophia would go visit her family and I would be alone. I felt it in quiet moments when I achieved something new and had no one from my childhood to share it with. I had been thinking more and more about that empty space, about whether it needed to stay empty, about whether holding on to anger and resentment was serving me anymore, or if it was just weighing me down. So when Jessica sent me another message, this one simply asking if I would meet her for coffee, I surprised myself by saying yes. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in a part of the city neither of us frequented. Jessica arrived first, and I saw her through the window as I approached. She looked older somehow, more tired. The perfect polish she had always maintained seemed dimmed. She stood up when I walked in, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. I nodded and sat down across from her. "I'm not promising anything. I just agreed to listen." "That's more than I deserve." She took a deep breath. "Maya, I've spent the last 2 years in therapy, trying to understand why I treated you the way I did. And I've realized a lot of things about myself that aren't easy to admit." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I was jealous of you," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Not of your success, because I didn't know about that. But of your courage. You left law school to chase a dream, and I was too scared to admit that I hated being a lawyer. You built something from nothing, and I had everything handed to me. You were willing to be seen as a failure in pursuit of something you loved, and I was so terrified of failing that I only ever did the safe thing." She wiped at her eyes. "And instead of admiring you for that, instead of being inspired by you, I tore you down. I made you feel small because it made me feel bigger. I convinced myself and everyone else that you were the disappointment, when really, I was disappointed in myself." I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't the defensive, excuse-making apology I had expected. This was real self-awareness. Real growth. "That doesn't make what I did okay," Jessica continued. "Nothing makes it okay. I was cruel and petty and I hurt you deeply. I can't take that back, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I did and I see who you are, and I'm just so incredibly sorry." We talked for over 2 hours. She told me about how her marriage was falling apart, how Brad had shown his true colors after my success, trying to use our connection for his own benefit. She told me about how she was considering leaving her law firm to do something more meaningful. She told me about how watching me from a distance, seeing me thrive, had forced her to confront how unhappy she was with her own life. I told her about the pain she had caused me, about the years of feeling less than, about how hard it had been to believe in myself when my own family didn't. I told her about the hurt and anger I had carried, and how it had both motivated me and weighed me down. It wasn't a magic conversation that fixed everything. Years of hurt couldn't be healed in one afternoon, but it was a start. It was honest and real and more than we had ever given each other before. As we were leaving, Jessica asked, "Do you think we can ever be real sisters?" I thought about it for a moment. "I don't know, but maybe we can try." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "That's enough for me." Over the next year, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. Coffee turned into occasional dinners. Dinners turned into phone calls and text conversations. She came to one of my film premieres, not as someone trying to cash in on my fame, but as my sister, standing to the side and cheering me on. It was awkward at times, and there were moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, but we both worked at it. My relationship with my parents was more complicated. They had reached out too, wanting to reconnect, but there was still so much hurt there. We exchanged occasional messages, and I sent them tickets to events sometimes, but I kept them at arm's length. Maybe someday that would change. Maybe not. I was okay with the uncertainty. Mark never really apologized, not in any meaningful way. He tried to ride my coattails, using my name to boost his own profile, and when I made it clear that wasn't acceptable, he retreated back into his own life. I heard through Jessica that he was struggling, that his arrogance had cost him jobs and relationships. I felt bad for him, but I also felt like it was justice. Actions have consequences. Brad and Jessica eventually divorced. She told me it was the best decision she ever made, that leaving him allowed her to finally figure out who she was outside of other people's expectations. She started her own practice, focusing on nonprofit law, working with causes she actually cared about. We would meet sometimes, and she would tell me about her cases, and I would see in her eyes a spark that had never been there before. 5 years after that dinner, I was being honored at a major industry gala for my contributions to entertainment and philanthropy. The ballroom was filled with celebrities and executives and influencers. I was sitting at a table with Sophia, Richard, and other members of my inner circle, and at another table nearby, I had invited Jessica. During my acceptance speech, I talked about the journey I had been on. I talked about the importance of believing in yourself, even when no one else does. I talked about the value of surrounding yourself with people who support your dreams. And then, at the end, I did something I hadn't planned. "I also want to acknowledge that growth and change are possible," I said, looking out at the audience. "That people can learn from their mistakes and become better. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong and work to make it right. To my sister Jessica, who is here tonight, thank you for being willing to do that hard work. Thank you for showing me that families can heal." Jessica was crying in the audience. I saw her stand up and applaud, and others joined her, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the warmth of family love, earned and genuine and real. After the event, Jessica and I stood outside together, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not just for all of this," she gestured at the building behind us, "but for becoming someone who can forgive. I don't know if I could have done the same." I didn't forgive for you, I admitted. I forgave for me. Holding on to that anger was exhausting. Letting it go set me free. She nodded. Still, it takes strength to let go. That's another thing I'm learning from you. We stood there in comfortable silence for a while. Two sisters who had lost each other and found their way back, changed but maybe better for it. That night, as I got into my car to head home to my beautiful house in the hills, I reflected on everything that had happened. The pain, the triumph, the revenge, the healing. It had been a long journey, and not always an easy one, but I wouldn't change it. Every moment, good and bad, had made me who I was. The suffering had taught me strength. The loneliness had taught me self-reliance. The success had taught me that I didn't need anyone's approval to be worthy, and the healing had taught me that holding on to pain only poisons yourself. I thought about that young woman sitting at the dinner table 2 years ago, watching her sister play that embarrassing video, feeling small and worthless and angry. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, it gets better. It gets so much better. Hold on. Keep working. Keep believing. Because someday, you're going to be exactly where you want to be, and all of this pain is going to make sense. I pulled out my phone and looked at my social media. Hundreds of thousands of new followers since the award ceremony tonight, messages of congratulations and support from people all over the world. And there, among them, a simple message from my mother. We watched you tonight. You were beautiful and graceful and everything we should have told you that you were years ago. We love you. I read it twice. Then I typed back, I love you too. Let's have dinner soon. Because that's what real revenge looks like. Not the dramatic moment when you prove everyone wrong, though that's satisfying too. But the moment when you realize that you've healed enough to let them back in, when you've grown enough to show mercy, when you've succeeded enough that their approval doesn't matter anymore, but you give it anyway because you've become bigger than the hurt they caused. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I learned that the sweetest revenge is a life well lived, a heart that's healed, and the choice to be better than the people who hurt you. I had built an empire. But more importantly, I had rebuilt myself. And that was worth more than any contract, any award, any amount of money. I drove home through the glittering city, past billboards with my face on them, past theaters showing my films, past people who maybe recognized me and maybe didn't, and I felt at peace, complete, whole. This was my empire, not just the production company or the films or the fame, but the life I had created, the person I had become, the relationships I had built and rebuilt. An empire of self-worth, of authenticity, of hard-earned success and harder-earned forgiveness. And it was beautiful.